My name is Eva. As I sit in my cozy, candlelit apartment, sipping on a warm cup of tea, a sense of peace washes over me. It's a far cry from the chaos and manipulation I once endured. The journey to this serenity was long and arduous, but looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. It all came to a head on a fateful Sunday. I watched the live stream of my parents' vow renewal, a performance they'd been rehearsing for who knows how long. Mom was decked out in a glitzy silver gown, and Dad was sporting a pretentious tuxedo, adjusting his cufflinks like he owned the world. The guests clapped and commented about what a beautiful example of commitment it was, but little did they know the truth. I'd cut off the financial pipeline, and the signs of collapse were already showing. The caterer had canceled at the last minute, the floral vendor was suing for a bounced check, and the reception venue was locked when the guests arrived. Yet, my parents tried to hide it, grinning through the chaos and sipping on sparkling cider as if it were champagne. But this wasn't the start of the conflict. It all began when I was unceremoniously kicked out of my childhood home. My parents, Victor and Diana, had always been controlling and manipulative. Victor was a shrewd businessman, always looking for the next deal, and Diana was a social climber, more concerned with appearances than anything else. One morning, over burnt toast and cold coffee, Victor snapped, "We're not your bank anymore." His voice was sharp with smugness, and his eyes gleamed with satisfaction, like he'd just won a war I never knew we were fighting. Diana sat there, sipping her tea with her pinky up, watching me pack my bags as if I were an unwanted guest. "You're 25. Grow up. We've done enough. You should thank us for what we've given you," Victor sneered. With that, I was thrown out onto the street with a duffel bag, a broken heel, and a dead phone battery. But little did they know, I had a secret weapon. My grandfather, Arthur, my mother's estranged father, had left me a substantial trust fund. The trust manager, Henry, had kept it quiet per my grandfather's legal instructions, and I gained full access on my 25th birthday, just a few days before. Later that day, when my phone finally charged at a local diner, I received a message from Henry. "Hi Eva, just got their auto transfer for $20,000 monthly allowances again. Shall I approve like always?" I stared at the screen, a smile spreading across my face. I typed one word, denied. I moved into a small apartment downtown the next day, relishing in the solitude and independence. It was a far cry from the suffocating atmosphere of my parents' house. But my parents didn't take my newfound freedom well. By Friday, Diana texted me. "Eva, darling, your father's business trip is in jeopardy. Could you please?" She didn't need to finish the sentence. They'd grown so used to me funding their every whim that they forgot I had limits. I replied, "Maybe it's time you grow up. You're 55. Then I turned off my phone. That night, I lit a candle, not for peace, but for memory. I wouldn't forget the silence that followed, the silence of people realizing their cash cow had run dry. As the days passed, my parents grew more desperate. My email inbox was flooded with polite yet desperate messages about the mortgage on their beach house. They'd used my trust to refinance it, and now they wanted my help to keep it afloat. I forwarded every email to Henry, and he took care of the rest. Then, I found the spreadsheets. Hidden in an old cloud folder Henry shared, labeled Historical Transactions, Thompson Estate, were line after line of expenses. $12,000 for Diana's luxury shopping spree in Paris, $6,000 for Victor's golf club membership, and $25,000 for a new yacht. They'd used me as a human credit card, all while lecturing me about financial responsibility. I began drafting a letter to our extended family. Aunt Grace, Uncle Frank, and Cousin Lily with her mansion. I wanted them to know the truth, not out of revenge, but to expose the lies and manipulation. But I held off on sending it, waiting for them to cross one more line. And they did. On a Wednesday, I received a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, and when I played it, I heard the voice of Pastor Miller. "Hi Eva, I've been asked to officiate your parents' vow renewal this Sunday. I heard you're covering the reception costs again. That's very generous. I was stunned. Reception costs? Again? I logged into the trust back-end and found a pending invoice for $15,000 for the catering deposit. Approved by Victor, just days after he'd told me they weren't my bank anymore. I laughed, a bitter laugh that echoed in the empty apartment. He had the audacity to call me entitled while stealing from my trust. I clicked reject and sent an email to Pastor Miller, explaining that I wouldn't be attending or funding the event. 2 hours later, Diana's text came in. Eva, why would you embarrass us like this? Do you know how this makes us look? Family will talk. I replied, then give them something worth talking about. The next morning, Henry called to tell me that my parents had filed a formal request to restructure the trust. They were claiming financial dependence based on their so-called parental investment and long-term caregiving. It was a blatant attempt to rewrite history and regain control. I told Henry to proceed legally. We prepared for a full audit, gathering statements of distributions and the timeline of my inheritance access. I knew my parents would try to go public, so I prepped for the storm. I set my social accounts to private, downloaded all relevant emails and bank receipts, and printed them neatly. On Sunday, as I watched the disaster of their vow renewal unfold, I knew I was on the right track. On Monday, I sent the letter to our extended family. It was a calm, factual statement, accompanied by bank statements, screenshots, and emails. At the end, I included a personal note: love doesn't demand repayment. Manipulation does. I've chosen to walk away from both. By Tuesday, the family group chat was in an uproar. Cousin Lily texted, "They said you were unstable, but this is precision." Uncle Frank called to say I'd done the right thing. Diana called me 15 times, but I didn't answer. I was letting the silence teach her what my words never could. On Wednesday, there was a knock at my door. It was Henry, not in his usual suit but in jeans and a hoodie. He handed me a manila envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter from Victor. It wasn't an apology. It was full of disappointment and guilt-tripping, saying that money wasn't everything and that I'd regret my actions when they were gone. I folded the letter into a small square and placed it in my drawer, not out of sentiment, but as a reminder. Then I looked at Henry and asked, "Ready?" He nodded, and we headed to the estate attorney's office. I'd requested a meeting to update the trust. A new clause stated that if I passed before the age of 45, the funds wouldn't go to my parents but to a scholarship for girls from emotionally manipulative families. As the seasons changed, fall brought a sense of peace and quiet to my life. I started volunteering at a community legal aid office, listening to stories of people who had been taken advantage of. One day, I met a girl named Amy, 20 years old, with tear-streaked cheeks. Her mother had used her name to take out a loan, and now she was being blamed for it. I reached into my bag and handed her a document, a blank template of financial boundaries and personal agency. I told her, "This is yours. You don't have to be a victim anymore." She looked up at me, hope in her eyes. I never went back to my parents' house. They still throw parties and pose for photos, but something has changed. The invitations stopped, and the emergency calls went silent. Justice has arrived, not in the form of vengeance, but wrapped in boundaries, delivered in clarity, and sealed with truth. And as I sit here, in my little corner of the world, I feel a sense of peace that I've earned.